Imagine stepping into like a contemporary art gallery. The art on the walls is progressive, the vibe is enlightened, and it feels like this pure meritocracy. But what if I told you the modern art world operates on a hidden corporate ladder that is actually more rigid and biased than a 1950s boardroom?
I mean, it completely shatters that illusion we all have.
Right.
We naturally want to believe that the art world is this creative sanctuary, a bubble completely detached from the systemic biases that plague standard office environments.
Right, exactly. So today we are taking a deep dive into the hidden systemic gender biases operating behind the scenes in the contemporary art world. And to do this, we are looking at a really fascinating 2025 research paper titled Sexism in Contemporary Art.
Yes, and that was written by researchers Buse and Sam and Suzan Ceylan-Batur.
Yeah, and published in the Women's Studies International Forum.
It is a brilliant piece of research, actually, because it captures the lived, ground-level experiences of art professionals working in Turkey right now. And then it takes those personal stories and builds a brand new, scientifically validated tool designed to actually measure sexism in art on a global scale.
Which is so cool. Our mission today is to figure out how sexism operates so effectively in a field that prides itself on being, well, so forward-thinking. Okay, let's unpack this, starting with the illusion of access.
Right.
The researchers began by interviewing 10 artists, gallery workers, and collectors in Turkey, mostly between the ages of 24 and 37. And what they found is that despite all our modern progress, the art world is still very much a boys' club driven by informal, closed-door networks.
And that qualitative data is incredibly revealing. Because on paper, the art world looks entirely open. Anyone can buy a canvas, paint something, and, declare themselves an artist.
So there's no formal licensing board.
Exactly. But the study highlights that professional success, actually making a living, relies heavily on mentorship and networking. And the women interviewed reported a stark systemic lack of mentorship compared to their male peers.
There was this one quote from a 27-year-old female artist that really stood out to me. She basically pointed out that men in the art world mentor other men. They pull each other up the ladder. Meanwhile, women are left totally isolated to figure out the industry on their own.
Yeah, it's very isolating.
It reminds me of being invited to this highly exclusive VIP party. You get dressed up, you get past the bouncer, you're inside the venue, but once you arrive, you realize you were only allowed to stand in the hallway.
Right, while all the real deals are happening somewhere else.
Exactly. The handshakes, the career-making moments, they're happening in a locked-back room that you simply do not have the key for.
And what makes that illusion of meritocracy so dangerous is that you are technically in the building. So the industry can claim they are inclusive while you are systematically excluded from the actual mechanisms of power.
But wait, I have to push back on this a little bit. Isn't art supposed to be a pure meritocracy where the best work just naturally rises to the top regardless of who made it? I mean, if a painting is a masterpiece, a collector's going to want it, right?
Well, what's fascinating here is how the research uses Pierre Bourdieu's concept of symbolic power to explain exactly why that isn't the case.
Symbolic power.
Yeah. Bourdieu argued that power isn't just about money or physical force. True power is about who gets to define what is valuable, what is tasteful, and what is legitimate.
I see.
In the art world, that power is held by gatekeepers. The curators, the wealthy collectors, the established gallery owners.
And those gatekeepers are historically and predominantly male.
They are. So access isn't just about getting your painting through the front door of the gallery. It's about being given a genuine seat at the table with those specific gatekeepers.
Right.
Because that network of male professionals essentially dictates the cultural narrative. If the informal networks that validate art are male-dominated, then the criteria for what constitutes a masterpiece is inherently shaped by the male perspective.
That makes total sense.
Yeah, the meritocracy is an illusion because the scales of merit are weighted long before the art is even evaluated by the public.
But let's say a woman does manage to navigate that boys' club. She gets her painting out of the hallway and onto that pristine white wall. The bias doesn't stop at the door. It actually attaches itself directly to the price tag.
Oh, absolutely.
The researchers found that women's artwork is consistently pigeonholed, trivialized, or even sexualized once it's on display.
It is a systemic devaluation.
Yeah.
And it happens primarily through language and categorization. The researchers spoke to a 29-year-old gallery worker who noted a very specific, recurring trend.
Right.
When women create art, it is frequently labeled by critics and buyers as craft or decorative.
Just hearing the word craft in a fine art context, you can almost hear the price dropping in real time.
Seriously.
It instantly diminishes the market value compared to serious or intellectual art created by men. And the language bias goes even deeper than that. The study points out how women are routinely labeled as female artists, while men are simply referred to as artists.
Right. It's a linguistic modifier that immediately establishes a hierarchy. By adding the word female, the industry implies a deviation from the norm. The unstated baseline, the default artist, is assumed to be male.
Wow.
Yeah. The female artist is reduced to a subcategory. And in the art market, subcategories rarely command the same financial premium as the standard.
And the justification they use for this financial premium is incredibly frustrating. There was a revelation from a 24-year-old gallery assistant in the study.
Oh, I remember this.
Yeah, she reported that collectors will explicitly state out loud to her that they actively avoid buying from female artists because they assume the artists will eventually pause their careers for family reasons.
It's just wild to say that out loud.
Imagine pouring your soul into your life's work only to have it financially devalued because of a hypothetical future event. If the art is identical in quality, how do collectors rationalize this blatant price disparity in their own minds?
They justify it entirely through the lens of investment risk. In the contemporary art market, a piece of art isn't just an aesthetic object you hang in your living room. It's a financial asset.
Right.
Collectors are betting on the future trajectory of the artist's career. Will they get into major museums? Will their subsequent pieces sell for double? The market perceives men as creating more valuable art because they perceive men as having uninterrupted, culturally supported career paths.
So they literally view buying a woman's art as a riskier stock.
That is exactly how the calculus works. Even when the art world appears incredibly progressive on the surface, it operates on a cold market bias that inherently favors male creators.
It's so cynical.
It is. Collectors use the societal expectation of women as primary caregivers as an economic rationale to devalue their current tangible output.
Which creates a brutal self-fulfilling prophecy.
Exactly. They invest less money in women, which gives women fewer resources to produce new work and exhibit, which in turn reinforces the collector's initial belief that the male artists were the safer, more dominant investment all along.
And that fear from the collectors that women will pause their careers leads us directly into the study's findings on the motherhood penalty.
Yes.
Because it isn't just a hypothetical fear from buyers. For the women in this study, it's a harsh, immediate reality. One 24-year-old artist noticed that the moment she had a child, galleries instantly lost interest in showcasing her work.
Just completely dropped her.
Yeah. The underlying assumption was that she was no longer a serious artist. It's like this sudden career gravity that gets switched on, and it only pulls down half the artists in the room.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this mirrors the glass ceiling effect we see in traditional corporate settings, but it's arguably more insidious in the creative fields.
How so?
Well, corporate jobs demand your time, but art demands an intense perceived devotion. The assumption that motherhood somehow diminishes a woman's professional commitment causes immense isolation. When galleries pull back their support, these women lose visibility and their careers stagnate. Not because their talent magically disappeared overnight, but because the institutional support structure just vanished.
And even if they don't have children, female professionals reported incredibly hostile environments. It's not just passive exclusion, it's active mobbing.
Yeah, the mobbing is intense.
A 29-year-old woman in the study described how male gallery owners would constantly mansplain her own work and her own career choices to her, even when these men had far less experience in her specific field than she did.
We have to look at that behavior as a mechanism of control. Mansplaining in a professional setting isn't just an annoyance or a quirky personality flaw. It is a calculated assertion of dominance.
Right, it's about power.
Exactly. It serves to continuously undermine the woman's authority and expertise, subtly reminding her of her subordinate place within the gallery's hierarchy. It is a form of psychological attrition.
That's a good way to put it.
Over time, it slowly wears down female professionals, pushing them to either accept a secondary role or leave the industry entirely.
Stories of exclusion like that are powerful, but, we know how this goes. Galleries and institutions can easily dismiss them as isolated incidents or interpersonal conflicts.
Oh, definitely. Just bad apples.
Right. To force real, massive institutional change, you can't just have anecdotes. You need hard mathematical proof that this bias exists everywhere, which is exactly what these researchers set out to build next, with the creation of the Sexism in Art Scale, or SIS.
This is the pivot where the research becomes a highly practical tool. The researchers surveyed 154 participants from all across the art world, curators, academics, gallery owners, musicians, just to test this 12-item scale.
Wow, so a really broad group.
Yeah, they wanted to see if those qualitative human stories could be mathematically measured and validated across a much broader population.
And the items on the scale, I mean, they are jarring. Participants were asked to read statements and rate them on a scale from 1 to 5, from strongly disagree to strongly agree. I want to read a few of these specific statements out loud so you can really hear what was being tested. Imagine taking a professional survey and rating this. I see nothing wrong with collectors deciding to purchase works based on the artist's gender.
Yikes.
Or this one. An artwork cannot be considered a true piece of art unless it is created by a man. Here's another. It is more appropriate for women to practice art as a hobby rather than as a profession.
It's hard to even hear.
And finally, I think that physical labor jobs, like setting up exhibitions, are men's work. Here's where it gets really interesting. Are people in the contemporary art world actually agreeing with statements as extreme as women should only do art as a hobby in this day and age?
It is genuinely uncomfortable to hear those statements isolated like that. But what the statistical analysis revealed is something called a unidimensional structure.
Okay, unpack that for me. What does a unidimensional structure actually mean in plain English?
It means prejudice isn't a buffet where you can just pick and choose which biases you hold. If you look at the scale, some biases are overt and hostile, like saying only men make true art. Others seem subtle or structural, like defining the heavy lifting of exhibition setup as male labor.
Right.
A unidimensional structure means all of these items measure the exact same underlying toxic construct. Think of it like a tree. If you agree with the subtle biases, like who should hang the paintings, it is mathematically almost guaranteed that your roots also connect to the overt biases, like believing women shouldn't be professionals. They operate together.
So you can't just be a little bit sexist about the physical labor in the gallery without it completely bleeding into how you financially value the paintings themselves.
That is the core takeaway.
Yeah.
The scale proved to be highly reliable with strong internal consistency. This data confirmed that these are not just a few rogue individuals holding fringe beliefs.
Yeah.
These are measurable, deeply interconnected attitudes permeating the entire culture of the art world. Even if someone doesn't express the extreme views out loud at a fancy gallery opening, if they hold the subtle biases, the extreme biases are statistically right there beneath the surface.
So if we can measure this toxicity so clearly, where is it actually coming from? Are these gatekeepers just openly misogynistic, or is the psychology deeper than that?
It's much deeper, and the researchers proved it by correlating their new sexism in art scale with existing established psychological measures.
Like what?
For instance, they compared it with the ambivalent sexism inventory. That inventory measures two things: hostile sexism, which is the overt antipathy and anger toward women, and benevolent sexism.
Benevolent sexism. That sounds like an oxymoron. What does that actually look like in a gallery setting?
Benevolent sexism involves patronizing attitudes that seem positive or protective on the surface, but actually serve to restrict women to traditional subordinate roles.
Give me an example.
In a gallery setting, it might look like a male gallery owner being overly paternal. He might steer a female artist away from a highly demanding, controversial solo exhibition because he thinks he is protecting her from the stress, or assuming she'd rather focus on her family. It looks like care, but it functions as a career roadblock. And the study found strong positive correlations here. High sexism in art means you are highly likely to exhibit both hostile and benevolent sexism in your general life.
Wow. But there was also a really fascinating negative correlation in the data, right? They looked at the BEM sex role inventory.
They did. The BEM sex role inventory looks at how closely individuals identify with traditional masculine or feminine traits.
Okay.
Traditional masculine traits in this context mean things like dominance, extreme assertiveness, and emotional detachment. The researchers found that individuals who reject those traditional masculine traits as the default for a successful human actually hold far fewer sexist attitudes in art.
That feels like a massive key to understanding this.
Oh, totally.
It suggests that the root of the bias isn't just about disliking women, it's deeply tied to an adherence to traditional hierarchical masculinity. The people who are less rigid about enforcing traditional gender roles in their own identities are the ones much more capable of valuing a piece of art objectively, completely regardless of the creator's gender.
It shows that the bias is structural to how we define power and success, not just an aesthetic preference for certain types of paintings.
So if the problem is rooted in these incredibly deep structural views of gender and power, how do we fix a system that is this entrenched?
Well, the researchers outlined very specific policy recommendations,
Yeah.
breaking them down into structural reforms and cultural reforms.
Let's start with structural.
Structurally, they are calling for equity benchmarks for museums and galleries. You can't just hope for diversity. You need hard numbers ensuring balanced representation in exhibitions and acquisitions.
Right. What about the motherhood penalty?
To directly fight that, they recommend flexible work schedules for gallery staff and dedicated childcare support or specific project grants designed to retain female artists when they start families.
And culturally, how do you break up an informal boys' club?
Culturally, they advocate for formalized mentorship networks specifically for women. You have to intentionally pair emerging female artists with established professionals to give them that missing access to funding, collectors, and media coverage.
That makes sense.
Furthermore, they emphasize the absolute need for mandatory bias awareness training for curators and collectors to actively challenge how they assess artistic value.
It makes me think of trying to fix a slanted floor in an old house.
Oh, I like that analogy.
Right. If you just put up a temporary exhibition of female artists to create the appearance of inclusivity, it's like trying to fix the slanted floor by just hanging all the paintings crookedly.
Yeah, exactly.
It might look okay at a quick glance, but the foundation is still entirely compromised. If you want a real fix, you have to rip up the floorboards and rebuild the structural policies and the financial incentives that keep the system running.
This raises an important question, though. How do local cultural contexts mirror these global disparities? The study focuses heavily on Turkey, which is a fascinating context because it's a nation where rapid modernization efforts are constantly intersecting with deeply entrenched patriarchal norms.
Right.
But the researchers are quick to point out that this is not just a regional issue isolated to one country. They reference data from the National Museum of Women in the Arts, which clearly shows that women are grossly underrepresented and undervalued in museums, galleries, and auction houses globally.
So the Turkish context is basically just acting as a magnifying glass on a universal problem.
Exactly that. The motherhood penalty might be culturally magnified in places where women are more rigidly expected to be primary caregivers, but the underlying economic devaluation of women's creative labor is a global phenomenon.
Right.
Whether you are walking into a gallery in Istanbul, New York, or Paris, the gatekeeping mechanisms of the art market operate with a chilling consistency.
So what does this all mean? Why should you, listening to this deep dive right now, care about the internal politics and the pricing structures of art galleries?
Yeah.
It matters because the art we consume fundamentally shapes our culture. It dictates how we see ourselves, how we process our history, and how we imagine our future. If half the population is systematically filtered out by biased collectors, a lack of childcare, and informal boys' clubs, we aren't just failing those female artists.
No, we aren't.
We are failing ourselves. We are all being actively robbed of their genius, their perspective, and the cultural richness they would have provided to the world.
It really fundamentally changes our relationship with the art we do get to see. And, I want to leave you with a final thought to consider.
Let's hear it.
The next time you walk into a gallery and you stand before a beautiful, complex, uncredited piece of contemporary art, ask yourself, do you subconsciously picture the hands that made it as male? And if you do, how does that invisible image in your mind dictate what you or a billionaire collector are willing to believe that art is worth?
Man, it really makes you look at those perfect, pristine white gallery walls a little differently, doesn't it? Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the sources. We hope you stay curious, keep questioning the hidden structures around you, and look just a little bit closer the next time you visit a museum.